You think you know a person. You think you understand what someone's love means. But what happens when you betray that love, and in the most humiliating way possible? What happens when your secrets are exposed, and everything you thought you knew about yourself and your marriage shatters in an instant? This is not just about a betrayal. This is about a moment that changed everything. And I'll tell you this right now. It wasn't just my husband's life that was flipped upside down. It was mine too. And the worst part? I didn't even see it coming. I never thought it would happen like this. I never thought I would be caught. I wasn't a fool. I knew the risks. But I did it anyway. I let myself fall into temptation, and when it came crashing down, I was left standing there, with my entire life in ruins. You see, it wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't even about the physical act. It was about the moment my husband found out, the moment everything became real, the moment he saw me, really saw me, in a way that I had never wanted him to. And that changed him forever. It started innocently enough, or at least I told myself it was innocent. I was bored, not with my marriage, not exactly, but with the routine, the monotony, the same conversations, the same dinner dates, the same everything. And that's when he came along. The man who made me feel alive again. The man who made me feel wanted. I didn't plan it. I didn't wake up one morning thinking, today, I'm going to destroy my marriage. It was just an impulse. One night, one weak moment, and I allowed myself to be swept away. I wasn't prepared for what would happen next, for the way it would haunt me, for the consequences that would follow. You might be wondering, why did I do it? Why would I risk everything, my family, my marriage, my life, for something so reckless, so dangerous? Well, I'll tell you. Sometimes, when you're stuck in a place where you feel invisible, where you feel like you're just going through the motions, the chance to feel seen again is too powerful to ignore. It wasn't just the sex, it was the attention, the excitement, the thrill of something forbidden, of sneaking around, of living a life where no one knew the truth about who I really was. And for a while, it was exciting. It was like living in a different world, a world where I wasn't just someone's wife, where I was someone else's desire. But the problem with that kind of thrill? It doesn't last. You can't keep running forever. You can't keep living a double life and think there won't be consequences. And let me tell you, when the truth finally came crashing down, it was far worse than I ever imagined. It was supposed to be a routine business trip. My husband was away for the weekend, and I had been planning the affair for weeks. I had set everything up: the hotel room, the meeting time, the perfect alibi. It was supposed to be a few hours of escape from my life, a moment of freedom, but that freedom came with a price. I didn't think he would ever find out. I had been careful. I had been smart, or so I thought. Have you ever thought you could get away with something, only to have it blow up in your face at the worst possible moment? That was me. The moment my husband walked into that hotel room, I felt my entire world collapse around me. And in that moment, I understood something. There are no secrets. Not really. I remember the look on his face when he saw me, the way his eyes widened, the way his jaw clenched. He stood there, frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. The man who had once trusted me with everything, the man who had shared a life with me for years, was now looking at me as though I were a stranger. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. His eyes said it all. The shock, the betrayal, the disbelief. It was like he couldn't even comprehend what was happening. And I couldn't blame him, because in that moment neither could I. What do you do when the person you love most in the world looks at you like you're a stranger? What do you say when there are no words that can undo the damage you've caused? When everything you've built, everything you thought you knew about your life, is shattered in an instant? I wanted to say something. I wanted to explain, to make him understand that it wasn't what he thought, that it wasn't that simple. But the words wouldn't come. How do you explain something you can't even explain to yourself? How do you make someone see the truth when you don't even know what the truth is anymore? The silence between us was deafening. And in that silence, I could feel the walls closing in. The guilt, the shame, the overwhelming realization that I had done something irreversible, Something that could never be taken back. He didn't yell, he didn't scream. But the hurt in his eyes was enough to break me. And then finally, the words came. "Is this really who you are?" he asked, his voice cold, emotionless. And for the first time, I couldn't lie to him. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay. I couldn't pretend that this was just a mistake, that it didn't matter. "No," I whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. "It's not. But I don't know how to fix this." Have you ever had a moment where you realize that you've crossed a line you can never uncross? When you know that no matter how much you wish it away, you've done something that can never be undone? That's what I felt in that moment. That's what I still feel, even now. He left. He didn't even say goodbye. He just walked out of that hotel room, leaving me there, alone with the mess I had made. And I knew, in that moment, that I had lost him. Forever. But what I didn't know was that this wasn't just the end of our story. It was the beginning of something else. Something that would change both of our lives in ways I could never have predicted. I didn't hear from him for days, days that felt like years. I tried to reach out, tried to explain, but he wouldn't answer my calls. It wasn't until I showed up at our house that I saw him again. He stood there in the doorway, his eyes red from lack of sleep, his face drawn with exhaustion. "I'm leaving," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And that was it. No fight, no confrontation. Just a quiet declaration that everything we had built together was over. Can you imagine the heartbreak of knowing you've lost the love of your life, but also knowing that you did it to yourself? That's the weight I carried. The weight of my own choices. The consequences of my actions. In the weeks that followed, I tried to piece my life back together. I threw myself into work, into the things that I thought could distract me from the reality of my situation. But nothing could numb the pain. Nothing could fill the hole in my chest where my husband used to be. He moved out. He started over. He filed for divorce. And even though I knew I had no right to ask for anything, part of me hoped that he would come back, that he would forgive me. But he didn't. And maybe that was the hardest part of all. The realization that I didn't deserve his forgiveness. The truth is, the affair didn't just destroy my marriage. It destroyed me. It changed me in ways I didn't understand until much later. I became someone I didn't even recognize. I became a woman who didn't know how to trust, how to love, how to be loved. Have you ever done something so unforgivable that you couldn't even look yourself in the mirror? That's where I was. I couldn't even face myself, let alone the man I had betrayed. But time, as it always does, passed. I slowly began to heal. I started to understand what had driven me to cheat, what had driven me to betray the man who loved me. I had felt so lost, so empty, that I made a decision I couldn't take back. And I thought that would be the end of it. But life isn't always that simple. Months later, after everything had settled, I heard that he had started seeing someone else. Someone new. Someone who didn't know about me, about the woman I used to be. And I realized in that moment that he was finally moving on, that he had found his peace. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not that he was with someone else, but that he had found happiness without me. Do you ever wonder if the person you betrayed will ever forgive you? Or is it just too late for redemption? For me, I'll never know. I'll never get that chance. But I do know one thing. I've learned from my mistakes. I've learned that no matter how tempting something may seem, no matter how much you think you deserve it, betrayal is never the answer. And the cost of it is far higher than you could ever imagine. I've heard people say that once trust is broken, it can never truly be repaired. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was starting to understand that truth more clearly every day. The days after he left were an agonizing blur. I would wake up in the mornings, feeling the weight of what I had done pressing down on me. Every corner of the house, every piece of furniture, every little thing reminded me of the life I had destroyed. The life that had once been mine. Ours. I couldn't get used to the emptiness. I couldn't shake the silence that filled every room. There was a part of me that thought, maybe if I could just explain myself, maybe if I could just make him understand. but I knew deep down that it was too late. The damage had been done. Have you ever wished you could turn back time? To undo the mistakes, the moments you wish you could erase? That's where I was. But there's no going back. There's no second chance when you've broken someone's heart in the worst way possible. I tried to move on, or at least distract myself. I threw myself into work, buried myself in busy routines, but nothing worked. I would be sitting in meetings, my mind drifting to the way my husband's eyes used to look at me. The warmth, the love, the trust. And I would feel this sharp pain in my chest, the sting of knowing I had lost it all. It wasn't just about losing him as a partner. It wasn't just about the betrayal of our vows. It was the realization that I had lost myself too. I had let myself become someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of such deception. The shame was unbearable. I remember the night he came back. I had been home alone, sitting in the dark, reflecting on everything I had lost. And then, out of nowhere, the doorbell rang. My heart raced as I walked to the door, a mixture of fear and hope tangled together. When I opened it, there he was, standing on the doorstep, looking just as broken as I felt. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there staring at me with those empty eyes, eyes that once held so much love for me. For a moment I thought he might say something, yell at me, tell me how much I had hurt him. But no. He was silent, and that silence spoke volumes. Have you ever had someone look at you with so much hurt, so much disappointment that you couldn't breathe? That's how I felt when I saw him standing there, and in that moment, I knew. I couldn't fix this. Not with words, not with promises, not with anything. He stepped inside, his face pale, his body rigid with anger, sadness, and betrayal. I could feel the tension between us, thick and suffocating. The space that had once been filled with love and laughter now felt cold and foreign. "I don't know why I came back," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "Maybe it's because I needed to see you one last time. Maybe I needed to know that the person I loved is still in there somewhere. Or maybe I just needed to look at you and finally understand why this happened. What do you do when you're confronted with the person you hurt the most, and all you can do is stand there, knowing that there's no way to take it all back?" I couldn't speak. I didn't know how to answer. There was no excuse, no reason that could justify what I had done. There was no way to explain the deep, aching emptiness that had led me to betray him. How could I expect him to understand? How could I expect him to forgive me when I could hardly forgive myself? "I don't want you to forgive me," I finally said, my voice breaking. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were too little, too late. I had betrayed him in the worst possible way, and no apology could erase the hurt, the broken trust, the life we had built together. I had ruined it all. We sat there in silence, the weight of our unspoken words hanging between us. I didn't know what he was thinking, but I could see the tears welling in his eyes. For a brief, painful moment, it felt like everything might just fall apart even further, like we might both collapse under the weight of it all. But then, without warning, he stood up. He didn't look at me as he spoke, his voice flat and empty. "I'm done," he said, and I could hear the finality in his words. "I've been done for a while now, but I needed to come back. I needed to see you one last time, and now I know there's nothing left here." What do you do when the person you love says goodbye for good? When the life you thought you would have, the love you thought was unbreakable, disappears in an instant? His words hit me like a slap. They stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. There was nothing left. I had pushed him to the point of no return, and now I was finally facing the consequences of my actions. He walked out that night, and this time I didn't stop him. I couldn't. He was already gone in every way that mattered. The days that followed were a blur of loneliness. I stayed in the house, unable to face the world outside. The shame of what I had done kept me in hiding, curled up in the emptiness I had created. Every day felt like a punishment, but I knew I deserved it. There were moments when I thought I might go crazy, moments when the loneliness felt unbearable, when I would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wishing things could have been different, wishing I could have taken back that one moment of weakness that had set everything in motion. But there was no taking it back, and there was no going back. I had broken something that could never be repaired. Have you ever been so consumed by your mistakes that you couldn't see the way out? That's how I felt, stuck in a life of my own making, suffocating under the weight of my own regret. In the months that followed, I tried to move on. I tried to rebuild my life. But no matter how much I wanted to forget, I couldn't. The memories of him, his touch, his laugh, the way he used to look at me, haunted me. And I knew that no matter where I went, no matter who I was with, I would never be able to outrun the consequences of what I had done. And then came the day that changed everything. I had been sitting at home, staring at the phone in my hand, when I saw his name pop up on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I thought I might be dreaming. He hadn't reached out in months, and now, here he was. What do you do when the person you thought you had lost forever suddenly reaches out to you? Is it a chance for redemption? Or just another reminder of what you've lost? I took a deep breath and answered the call, my hands shaking. Hello? His voice was calm, controlled. I've moved on, he said, his tone steady. I've found someone else, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm happy. I don't hate you. I can't. But I've let go. I've moved on, and I think it's time you do too. Those words hit me harder than anything else he had ever said. In that moment, I realized that everything I had feared was true. He was gone. He had moved on. And I was left behind, facing the mess I had made of everything. Is it too late for redemption? Can you ever really move on after a betrayal that cuts so deep? These are the questions I had to face as I hung up the phone, knowing that my husband had truly closed the door on our marriage for good.